Hey everyone, welcome to Logan Smosh Pig. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor and please subscribe if you haven't already. Also consider joining my Patreon page for some cool perks. I'll leave a link in the description. Gather round, bookworms, because it's time for a new episode of Rock and Read. Today you will get to hear Chapter 11 and Chapter 12 of Iron Man, written by Black Sabbath's great guitarist, Tony Iommi. Chapter 11 is called Things Go Horribly South Up North. Here we go. After the rest fell apart, I got this offer to join a band called Mythology. They were from Carlisle, then a town of maybe 70,000 people on the border with Scotland, about a 3-hour drive from Birmingham. I went up there and Chris Smith came as well, as Mythology also needed a singer. The band had been reduced to Neil Marshall, the bass player and band leader, and a drummer who soon left, so I thought, well, I know a drummer. Enter Bill Ward. Then most of the rest moved to Carlisle and became Mythology. It was a logical step for us. In Birmingham, there was a limit to what we could do, but Mythology was the biggest band up there, so there were gigs to be played. I'd never been out of bloody Birmingham before, where I was still living with my parents. To move out and live up in Carlisle with the rest of the band was a big step. I didn't know anybody, so having Chris there, and Bill a little later on, was great. We lived in Compton House, a big place that was divided up into flats. We had a lounge and a little kitchen on the top floor, and a bedroom underneath that we all shared. The landlady and her daughter also lived in the house, but they weren't the only ones there. One day we were about to order fish and chips, and we counted out how many portions we'd need. You want chips, you want chips, you want chips. We counted one more than we actually needed because there was a young boy there who we took into account. I said to Bill, "Hang on, did you see that?" "Yeah, a boy." "Blimey, that was weird." It was really puzzling who this lad was. I said to our landlady, "It sounds mad, but we think we saw a young boy upstairs." She said, "Did he look about 7 or 8 years old?" "Yeah. Oh, he died in the house many years ago." She was completely aware of it. He had had a bad death right there, but he wasn't the only one. We saw this young girl there as well. Apparently she had drowned it in the bath. It didn't frighten us. If it had been ghosts jumping out at us, screaming, we'd probably ourselves, but they were just young kids. We were fairly careful with what we did there, with the noise and stuff. We got drunk on cheap wine a few times, for which we duly got told off, and we weren't allowed to bring girls in. No way. Women in there? You couldn't do that. I was 20 years old, and Neil was about 24 at the time. His claim to fame was that he used to play with Peter and Gordon. Neil was leading a much more grown-up band than the rest had been. Mythology had its own style. We played more guitar stuff than I was used to, blues with lots of solos. It gave me the opportunity to really start playing, to actually learn to play solos. As we gained more popularity, I gained more popularity. People liked what I played. Mythology had a great agent, Monica Linton, who used to get us quite a bit of work. Of course, she would always go, "You could play a bit more popular stuff, you know." We rehearsed in the lounge just quietly to put a song together, but most things we played were covers. We extended them or changed them around a bit so that we could put a solo in. We'd try it out in the house and then do it during the gig the next night. We had some blues and rock albums. One record we played a lot was the Moody Blues Days of Future Past, even though we didn't play any of the songs ourselves. And we had Supernatural Fairy Tales, an album by a band called Art. Their singer, Mike Harrison, later became famous with Spooky Tooth. We certainly played a couple tracks off that in our set, because they were big up there, so people wanted to hear that. We played places like the Town Hall in Carlisle, one of those horrible sounding buildings, the Cosmo, the biggest club there, like a big ballroom, and the Globe Hotel on Main Street, a place we later played with Sabbath as well. We did about 2 or 3 gigs a week. Not just in Carlisle, but traveling to Glasgow, Edinburgh, Newcastle, and all the little pockets and places in between. We had tough audiences up there. They could drink like Scotsmen and shout like them as well. "You know any Rolling Stones? Play some Rolling Stones!" They fought all the time. That was their night out. Bottles came flying in. But if you stopped playing, that would be it. They'd smash your stuff up. So you had to play on, no matter what. It was just like that movie, The Blues Brothers. You dodge bottles galore. All the audience were fighting, and it'd be really ridiculous. Then the next week, they'd all be back, and everything would be right as rain. And they'd be talking, and then it would all start over again. It's weird to see everybody fighting and the girls screaming and girls fighting. Living away from home, we were free to do and look as we pleased. I started to grow my hair, and it just went mad. People would actually be frightened of us because nobody had long hair like that. Also, I had this buckskin jacket that I lived in. I was proud of it and wore it everywhere. Bill Ward took that one step further. He'd had a t-shirt for I don't know how many days and go to bed in it. He was a dirty bugger and he hasn't changed much since. We actually called him Smelly for many years. We even bought gas masks and wore them when he was there, and Bill went, "Hang on a bit." The joke backfired on us when we got stopped by the police in Hartlepool. They spotted these gas masks in the back of our van and thought we were going to do a robbery. We got arrested and were hauled off to the police station. Imagine that happening in Park Lane. They would have talked about it for ages. Up in Carlisle, I smoked my first hashish. It made me go weird, almost paranoid. I thought, oh God, I don't know if I like that. And I sure didn't like what it would lead to in the end. This dealer came around to the house maybe 3 times because Neil would buy a little bit of hash off of him. One day this guy who was from out of town turned up with these suitcases. He said, "Can I leave these here because I've got to do a bit of running around?" We said yes and never saw him again. The next morning around 7 o'clock, bang! The police busted the door down and came into our room. They found these suitcases full of dope. We were shocked. "It's not ours." They locked us up and there was all hell to pay. I was petrified. Oh no! What are Mom and Dad going to think now? It was actually the first time I had some of my own, and it was maybe the 3rd time I had ever smoked it. We tried to explain that the suitcases weren't ours. They knew that because they had been following this guy. That's what led them to our house. They arrested him, but they were still trying to charge us with it, saying, "If you don't tell us what's going on, all this was in your possession, you know." They really laid it on and frightened us to death. They separated us and asked us all questions. Of course, we were thinking, I wonder what the others have said. Very awkward. It was splashed all over the newspapers because it was a big thing then. Band caught with drugs. It made the national news and also reached Birmingham, so my parents found out. Imagine the neighbors. That Iommi boy is a drug addict. I called my mother and she went absolutely potty at me, crying and screaming and shouting, "You brought disgrace to this house!" Sergeant Carlton was the one who busted us. He found out soon enough we weren't the hardened criminals they were looking for. He helped us sort it out. The drug fiasco was the main reason Mythology broke up. Getting gigs became difficult, so me and Bill just came back to Birmingham. I had to live at home again. It was embarrassing, but I had nowhere else to go. Bill and I stuck together. We wanted to start another band, so we looked around for singers. We went into a music shop and we saw this advert saying, "Ozzy Zig requires gig, owns his own PA." I said to Bill, "I know an Ozzy, but it can't be him." We drove around to this address, knocked on the door, his mother answered, and we said, "Is Ozzy in?" She said, "Yes, just a minute." She turned around and shouted, "John, it's for you!" And when he came to the door, I said to Bill, "Oh no, forget it. I know this guy." So let's see what happens in Chapter 12. Chapter 12 is called Down to Earth. "What do you mean?" Bill said. I said, "I know him from school, and as far as I know, he isn't a singer." I suppose Ozzy was shocked as well. I hadn't seen him since school, so the only thing he remembered about me was going around beating people up. Ozzy is a year younger than me, so he was in a class 1 year below mine. He always hung around with his friend Jimmy Phillips. Albert and me never associated with them at school. Me and Bill talked to Ozzy for a bit, and then we said, "Okay then." And off we went, and basically forgot about it. A few days later, Bill came over to our house and Mum made him a sandwich. Suddenly, Ozzy and Geezer turned up looking for a drummer. I said, Bill is a drummer, but we're going to stick together. But if Bill wants to do it, fine. But Bill said, No, I want to stick with Tony. I said, why don't we all have a go? Get a band and see how it goes. We got together for a first rehearsal. Ozzy's friend Jimmy Phillips was there as well, playing the slide guitar, and some guy was honking away on a saxophone. Geezer was a guitar player, but he decided to switch to the bass. Trouble was, he didn't have a bass, and neither did he have the money to buy one. He tuned down his Fender Telecaster trying to play the bass parts that way for that one rehearsal. I thought, oh, blimey. To my relief, he then went and borrowed a Hofner bass off his old band later. He only had 3 strings on that, but he only played 1 string then anyway. We rehearsed some blues stuff, did a few songs, and called ourselves the Polka Tolk Blues Band. Jimmy Phillips and me were going to try and get some gigs. We were in our lounge with the phone on the boxes, and I said, well, Jimmy, you phone this one. The Spotlight Entertainment sounds interesting. He phoned up and he went, can I speak to Mr. Spotlight, please? We all started laughing, and that was the end of that. Just disastrous. I then called Mythology's agent, Monica Winton, up in Carlisle, saying, we got this band. Give us a try. She said, okay, but you got to play some top 20 stuff in order to get away with playing some blues. Okay. Off we went to Carlisle. Near there in a place called Egremont, we played at the Tow Bar. This big Scottish bloke came up to me and said, your singer is... All right, thanks. We must have looked a right bloody bunch, me in my buckskin jacket, Bill in his smelly gear, and then there was Ozzy, who had shaved his head bald. Geezer wore a long Indian hippie dress, Eastman and all that stuff. I thought, that's weird, a bloke in a dress. What have I let myself in for? Geezer dated this girl who lived down the road from our shop, so I saw him walking past a lot. I saw him more often when I was in a band that played at this nightclub, and Geezer's band Rare Breed played there as well. You'd see him crawling up walls. Maybe he did acid in those days. I thought he was a loon. When we played the Globe Hotel in Carlisle, some idiot came in who had already knocked a couple of policemen out and killed one of their dogs. We were getting the equipment out. Geezer was coming down the stairs in his hippie clothes, carrying a couple of guitars, and this guy came after him. You arg! Geezer went, huh? He let go of the guitars and shouted, don't hit me, man, I'm peaceful. And then he ran. It was unbelievable, this completely frantic big bloke running after Geezer, and Geezer in his caftan, trying desperately to get away from him. It took a whole gang of policemen to get the bloke down into jail. Bloody hell! What a great way to start off with a new band. It didn't last that long with Jimmy Phillips and this saxophone player. There would be a solo and everybody would be playing it at the same time. It was a right row. These 2 guys just seemed to do this for a bit of a laugh, and that upset me. I had a little meeting with Bill, Geezer, and Ozzy, and said, the sax player doesn't really work, and neither does Jimmy Phillips. They said, what do you want to do? We didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings by firing them, so we told them we were breaking up. After that, we didn't see each other for a couple days, and then we got back together with just the 4 of us. Those first gigs were... This band was not nearly as good as Mythology, but I said, give it time, it'll be alright. I could see there was some potential. It was an odd combination. Somebody I knew from school who I didn't get along with back then, Geezer, who was from another planet, and me and Bill, who were probably from another planet as well. But it all seemed to gel. We rehearsed and did a few gigs, and things started working for us. We dropped the name the Polka Tolk Blues Band and changed it to Earth Blues Band, which quickly turned into Earth. We were doing 12-bar blues, 10 years after type stuff. I just liked anything with guitar. We had blues albums by artists I had never heard of, but there would be a guitar solo on one of them and we'd go, we'll do this track. It's good. Another 12-bar. The guitar work became more jazzy, and Bill really liked big band music, so we also went into more jazzy stuff. Ozzy was doing that fine. I used to be on at him a lot because at first he didn't know what to do. I was always saying, go on, talk to the audience, say this, say that. And Geezer learned to play the bass very quickly. Before he knew it, he was playing away. but because we played the blues, we didn't work a lot. In Birmingham, soul was big then, so there were only a couple places where we could play. For us, Mother's Club was probably the best venue in Birmingham. We played it, but I also saw Chicken Shack, John Heisman's Coliseum, and Free there. The town hall had a funny sound, but we played that a few times as well. In fact, the Volume 4 album's inside cover has a picture of us performing there. A lot of places we played at were in pubs where they'd have this big room that they didn't use, and so they'd rent it out to somebody who'd organize a gig in there. Like Jim Simpson, who rented a room over a pub in the center of Birmingham and called it Henry's Blues House. He had it maybe a couple nights a week, but it became very popular. Because the stages were so small, we all kind of grouped together. Ozzy hovered in front of me somewhere, but later, when we got to the bigger stages, he stood to the left in front of my stack, and I moved to the middle of the stage. Don't ask me why, I never knew. It seemed weird, but I liked it. Center stage was the best spot to hear how everything sounded. It stayed that way until we broke up. Ozzy only went to the middle when we got back together many years later in the 90s. The first thing the band bought was a huge Commer van with blacked out windows. It was a wreck! An ex-police van that had a great big hole in the floor on the passenger side. I once used the van to pick up this girl. We had put a carpet over the hole, trying to do it up a bit. She came out all dolled up, stockings on, climbed in the van, and went straight through the floor. The metal ripped her stockings and cut her leg. So that was the end of that romance. Mom helped us to get the deposit for it. We decked it out and put a couch in the back. We'd drive up to Carlisle in this thing, which was unbelievable. The van broke down constantly. But the roads were as well back then. To go to Carlisle or London seemed like never-ending journeys. As I was the only one who had a license and we couldn't afford a chauffeur, I was the one driving it. I'd pick everybody up to get to rehearsals and gigs, but because it was all down to me, I'd get absolutely shattered. So we're all lucky to have survived that, really. They'd all be asleep in the back, and I'd be slapping my face trying to stay conscious. The worst thing was, when I opened the window to keep awake, they'd go, "Oi, it's cold in the back." Driving home one night when everybody was asleep, I found this road that was identical to the one Ozzy lived in. I thought it would be great fun to drop him off there. It was 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. Ozzy was asleep, and I said, "All right, Oz, you're home." Whoa. He got out of the van, and I shouted, "See you tomorrow. Ta-ta." I pulled away, looked in my rearview mirror, and saw Ozzy trying to get into the wrong house. By the time he realized it wasn't his, we were gone, and he had to walk a mile or so to get to his own house. The next night I picked him up again, and he went, "You dropped me off at the wrong road yesterday." I said, "Oh, did I? Oh my God, I thought that was your road." No, it was the wrong road." Later that night on our way home, he fell asleep again in the back, and I stopped at the same wrong street. "All right, Oz, you're home." Whoa. He got out, we drove off, same again. He fell for that umpteen times. Mom helping out buying the van was one side of the coin. The other side was her moaning, "A bloody nuisance you are. You ought to get a bloody proper job." But she did a lot for us, and she looked after everybody. She'd always offer sandwiches or something else to eat, so the band loved her. And both Dad and Mum liked all the guys in the band. They took a particular shine to Ozzy. Dad thought he was funny, and he was right. Ozzy was a very funny guy. Ozzy's dad also helped out. Ozzy did have his own PA, but we needed a bigger one, so his dad signed a thing called a pay bond. This meant he guaranteed payment, and Ozzy could borrow the money to buy it. He bought a Triumph amp and 2 cabinets, and we had a Vox PA. In those days, you didn't have a sound man twiddling the knobs in the middle of the hall. All the sound came from your own gear on stage, so you'd start and you'd turn the volume up, and everybody would start screaming, "Turn it down!" We'd get complaints because we were always too loud. Always. If you were standing in front of your own cabinet, you couldn't hear anybody else anymore, so you'd move over to hear what was going on. You could never really hear the vocals, even though Ozzy turned up his amp so loud it would start whistling. We played at Henry's Blues House a lot, where we quickly developed a draw. Jim Simpson, the guy who ran that place, took an interest in us. He was a jazz guy, a trumpet player, And we played jazzy blues. He liked that, so he approached us for management. We didn't have anybody else. He had his blues house where we could play, so we thought, if we don't sign with him, we won't have the gig. Jim Simpson started managing us around the end of 1968, beginning of 69. So here we were, in possession of PAs, a huge wreck of a Commer van, a set list filled with jazzy 12-bar blues, and a manager, all dressed down in no particular place to go, but up. The first thing Jim Simpson did was put us on the Big Bear Folly, a UK tour with 4 bands playing, and the night always ended in a jam with everybody back on stage. In January 1969, we played the Marquee Club, but we didn't go down very well with John G., the manager of the place. The guy was into big bands, and when Bill claimed he was also into jazz, John G. played him some of that music and said, "Who's this then? Who is this?" Bill gave him a totally wrong name, and John G. really got the hump. Ozzy had a pajama top on and a tap around his neck. John didn't like that either. He probably thought we were really scruffy. Well, we were. We didn't have the money to look good. Ozzy actually used to walk around in bare feet. Geezer was the fashion guru who'd get the latest trend. He had these lime green trousers. They were his only pair, and he washed them all the time and wore them over and over again. One day he dried them by the heater and one of the legs caught fire. Because he loved this pair of trousers so much, his mom sewed another leg on, and from then on, he walked around with one green leg and one black leg. Mad. Bill actually won an award for the worst dressed rock star once, the scruffiest rock star out there, or something like that. He was really proud of it as well, and there was me in my buckskin jacket. What with the clothes and lots of hair, we certainly looked heavy. We all grew handlebar mustaches, and Bill grew a beard as well. There was no conscious thought behind that. If you're in a band, you develop a similar look. Oh, your hair has gotten a little longer. Looks good. Leave it like that. The downside of it was that we didn't have any women coming to the gigs. Scruffy long hair, only blokes sitting there. Come to think of it, you did see some, but they looked like blokes. Well, that's the end of chapter 12. Let me know what you thought of both chapters in the comments below. Before I go, I want to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon, Matt and Stacy from Canada. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.